Hey gamers, this is Liz Davidson from Beyond Solitaire, and I'm here with two of my very good friends. I got Brant Guillory from the Armchair Dragoons and Paul Wright, who's my co-designer for our hopefully upcoming game Foxes and Lions, and also a heavy gamer extraordinaire, actually Omni gamer extraordinaire. But we're here to talk about the 2025 top 25 solo historical games list. So, Brant, do you want to kind of run people through what it is we're doing since you're my partner in crime on this?
Sure. We're doing the same thing we did the last 2 years. And done. No. So yeah,
Done.
For those of you familiar with the social sciences research, this is what we call the methods section of the paper. We just put together a basic Google form, and we're asking folks what are their favorite solo or solitaire war and historical board games, and the solo and solitaire piece. Not that we're going to get too wound up in definition, but we weren't necessarily looking for purpose designed solitaire games. If you enjoy playing a multiplayer game by yourself, multi-handed, or using bots or whatever, like cool, just stuff you enjoy playing on your own. And so we ask folks to plug in their top 5. And we do ask for folks to plug in the BGG URLs. So from Board Game Geek, because that helps us keep the data consistent. And I'm sure we'll talk later about where some of the pitfalls of that come in, but it allows us to know for sure what spelling, what version, what specific game you're referring to, especially because there's some things that have very similar titles. It gives us specific titles rather than series of games. So there's a variety of advantages to that. The disadvantage is it's a pain in the butt to, tab between things and cut and paste, especially if you're doing it on a phone. We also ask a couple of just optional questions at the end, not necessarily pure demographics, but along those lines. How long you've been wargaming? What percentage of your board gaming diet is wargaming? We ask some folks sort of, we always ask, where did you hear about this? Because kind of curious where we should be targeting some promotion there. But those are the kinds of things that we ask folks about. That optional piece at the end sort of changes a little bit year to year. We always ask, where did you hear about it and how long you've been wargaming? But the other pieces will change some questions out here and there. We add it all up. First place vote gets 5 points. Second place vote gets 4 points. Kind of like a truncated version of the college football rankings. And then we take a look at the high score, right? Who had the most points in the rankings? And then we just stack them up from there. In a few cases, we get some ties on those points. In that case, we then sort by the average. So the one that got more higher votes, not sure that's grammatically correct, go with it. That's the higher average wins ties. And then we stack them up from there. Liz ends up putting the geek list on Board Game Geek of the top 25 this year. I think it's actually the top 26 because it was a tie at the 25th spot. And then we post the entire list all the way down over at the Armchair Dragoons site. And then we'll also post a couple of articles following up where we kind of dig into some of those optional questions. We slice and dice the data set by how long you've been wargaming, what percentage of your diet is wargaming. So we'll mix and match some of the data diving as well.
And of course, Brant does all the real work because I'm a bum.
At this point, I've got a couple of sort of templated pieces for the spreadsheet, so it's a little easier to. It's not pure macros where it's like just push a button and it does all the work for me, but I might record some macros for this next year now that we've done it enough.
So I think that we actually just go right to the top and talk about the big drama of the list, which is that in the third year, so for the first 2 years, D-Day at Omaha Beach was the number 1 by a very wide margin, to the point where I didn't actually expect a dislodge this year. I just kind of assumed D-Day at Omaha Beach would be the top again, but it wasn't, because the number 1 was Fields of Fire Deluxe. Paul, you're a big Fields of Fire man, so how do you feel about it? How do you feel about the upset?
I feel happy. I feel vindicated. Much as I love D-Day at Omaha Beach, and much as I respect John Butterfield, who I think is the most represented designer on the list, certainly up there. But the reason I love Fields of Fire, which is also on the list in its non-deluxe version, right? Not as high, obviously, as the newer version. I love it because I think it's probably the best simulation of company level engagement and command that I've seen, certainly in war games. I will admit, though, when I got involved with the earlier version, the non deluxe, the less recent one, I bounced off of it at a certain point because the onboarding and the rules were not, welcoming to a newcomer, even an experienced wargamer. And that's something the whole community knew. This is not news. But I think everyone was so impressed with the new release at how good it was in onboarding you to the game. The number of introductory materials that ease you into the system, that help you understand why it is the way it is, plus all the other videos and fan-made materials that have been made for this new version. I think it's not surprising to me, actually, that the new version leapt up as high as it did. I think onboarding is the key here, and maybe that's a lesson every company and designer should take to heart. I know I am in my own design, thinking about how to onboard players to more complex games.
Yeah.
Well, you keep using the term onboarding, man. I do this to get away from corporate America.
Yeah,
well,
I'm
let's
not a
lean in
corporate
on
guy.
this. And
Not a corporate guy in any way, but I guess I stole that lingo.
we'll put a pin in this conversation for later. No, I'm joking. Actually, one thing that it does give me some hope for, like the ability for heavy games to really get in and be a big part of people's lives. A lot of times I really only have time for a shorter game, or I'll play a game I already know, or like it takes real work to get into like a heavier new system. And it makes me very happy that Fields of Fire Deluxe is like delivering on that level, both for itself and yes, like as a community wide indicator. People like heavy games, people are hungry for that. And if you present it in a way that is going to be accessible enough, like they will, if you design it, they will come. I think Fields of Fire has its own kind of legendary status, but I still see it as an encouraging sign for what people are willing to do and learn if it's presented well.
I think what made a difference to me this time around, after many journeys with the game, I've had it until recently on my table, which is pretty big table. I can have multiple games on it, but it's been on my table for about 6 months straight.
Oh, wow.
And the reason it stays on the table, first of all, I love it, I enjoy it, but I also now have grokked the rules enough that returning to it after a bit of a pause isn't the nightmare that it was before. When I played the older version, if I left that game, whether it was on the table or not, if I left it mentally for too long, I felt like I had to start all over again. I do not feel that way anymore.
That's awesome. By the way, for those of you who don't know, Paul's basement is like a wonderland of really, he's got a great game collection. He's got these big tables, and if you lift the tops off of them, World in Flames is under there.
It is hiding under there. Not on the solo list. I am so shocked.
What? People didn't want to solo World in Flames all year?
Okay, so here's the real question, and this is a slight digression off of the solo game stuff. But Paul, how long has the current game of World in Flames been going on that is hiding under the table?
We are now entering, I think, our second year of play with a group of 6. We are currently in 1941, so we have a ways to go.
So you're basically playing World War II in real time.
Kind of, yeah. We only meet about once a month in a good cycle, but then life gets in the way, vacations, work, kids, whatever, and so it becomes every other month. But we're getting better, we're getting faster, we're learning the game.
Yeah. So, yeah, but each turn in World in Flames is a month, isn't it? Or is it
it's a 2-month period.
So it's a 2-month period. You get together every 2 months. You are playing World War II in real time.
Yeah, more or less.
That's awesome.
So we're having like the hardcore games discussion today, and I actually think that's we're talking about things that we touched on a bit in the podcast, which I'll also link, that I did with Brant and Mike over at Armchair Dragoons. We looked at how many people had been wargaming for a long time, and the majority of contributors to this list had been playing war games for more than 40 years.
Yeah. So the
So
first year we did this back in 2023, when we asked that question, we did like, 0 to 1. So brand new war gamers, right? Rookies, 1 to 3, 3 to 10, I think, 10 to 25, and over 25 was what we asked the first time. And that over 25 was like 60 or 65% of the. Yeah, I'm in that block. So the next year we added an over 40 years. We went like 25 to 40 and then over 40 years worth of wargaming, which, gets you back to the mid 80s. Again, I'm still in that block also, but it's still the majority. It's a plurality. It's not a majority, but it's still really damn big. And so the folks that are responding to this survey, and again, I want to be real careful that we are not projecting these numbers to the population of wargamers as a whole. These are the respondents to the survey. That there's still a huge percentage of them that are that are over 40. So wargaming going back to the mid 80s, which also means that you're probably in your late 40s at the youngest. Not a lot of wargamers start at age 6. I'm not saying there aren't any, but not a lot. And
people with good parents.
yes, so you're up there in the you're in the over 50 age bracket at this point, and that's still a lot of folks. I do like that we continue to get more and more people in the 0 to 1 and the 1 to 3 bracket, which, as we pointed out on the podcast, those are folks that picked up wargaming post-pandemic. So that's, and not like during the pandemic. If you're in the 0 to 1 block or the 1 to 3 block, you only go back to like 2021, at the earliest. So those are solidly post-pandemic wargamers, which, again, cool. Yay. More younger wargamers out there, or not younger, but rookie wargamers out there. Bring them on.
Yeah, I am hoping that we'll get a more of a demographic mix in the list as we go on, just because I want better data so we can see like what people are playing in different groups.
Oh, yeah.
But one thing that was neat about the list is that it's still got, I would say that the list definitely skews towards older titles, but not entirely. Like Halls of Hegra is fairly recent. That came in 6. Pavlov's House, pretty recent as things go. I mean, it's aging now in terms of like our new hotness culture, but it's not really that old a game. Both the second editions from Whirly Gig, so Paxmere and John Company, are up in that top 25. I Napoleon is pretty spanking new.
Even Atlantic Chase is post-pandemic.
Yeah.
I mean, that one's not even 5 years old yet.
And it finally cracked the top 10.
Yeah.
Which,
I think it deserves it.
It strikes me as a strange one to play solitaire, but I get that there aren't a lot of other games on the topic. So if that's a topic you're interested in, you're sort of forced to adapt.
Mm-hmm.
So that would be my guess. But
I thought one thing that was interesting about the top 10 this time is Comancheria and Navajo Wars. And all due credit to Joel Toppin. I fell in love with Navajo Wars when it first came out. One of my favorite stories about that game is I was in Argentina on business for my university, and I was in the hotel, and I had brought Navajo Wars with me as something to pass away the time due to the jet lag. And I finally managed to, if you want to call it, win that game by helping the Navajo, the Dene, survive all 3 periods: the Spanish, the Mexican, the American periods. And I was so thrilled because that game is tough that, I was cheering, and I'm sure the Argentines in the hotel had no clue what this strange American was cheering about. And yet they had their own colonial experience in Argentina, of course. So it would have been nice to be able to tell them why I was so excited with that game. But I mention it mainly because those are unusual titles. They're not your typical war game, both in terms of perspective and mechanics and just overall interpretive approach. And the fact that both those titles have cracked the top 10, I think, speaks in some way to what Brant was talking about. in terms of changing demographics and changing understandings of what a war game can be.
And I think both of those have been in the rankings before, maybe not as high, but both of them have been there because we have called them out over the last couple of years for being up there. I do think it's interesting that it's not a topic that represents a large percentage of wargaming as a whole, but it does bubble up a bit here. I just pulled up the 2023 list. Navajo Wars was at 13. I was scanning for Comancheria, but I'm not seeing it in like the top 2025. But it Navajo Wars was up there. And then in 2024, where'd it go? Sorry, I had the rankings right there in front of me and I clicked on the wrong tab. I know Navajo Wars was 12th in 2024. And then Comancheria was down at 27. So
that's interesting.
So they were there
places
before
and risen.
Yeah,
they're on the rise, and they are both, of course, designed as solo games, which may help their ranking. Yeah.
So I would have to do a data dive for this that I haven't had time to do yet, but I'm very curious. So I feel like when you're making a list of games of top games, I think a lot of people kind of like I'm going to put my favorite worker placement. I'm going to put my favorite deck builder, and they'll try to like get variety among like types of game as well. Or like maybe, like for example, when I do top 20s, I'll be like, okay, well, which of the chip theory games is my favorite chip theory? And I might actually not put another, even if you could, in fact, cluster a bunch up at the top. So what I want to see is, are people who are putting Comancheria and Navajo Wars, are they putting both? Or are we having subsets of the data who put one and then a different subset who puts the other? And I'm also curious about that with regard to 11 and 12, which are Pax Premier and John Company 2nd edition. So are the people who like those Ricky Royal solo modes putting both of them on their list? Or are different subsets of people putting them and then they just happen to kind of reach parity on the list?
Yeah, that's something we can crunch. And then similar to what you were saying about, worker placement versus, whatever the area controller or narrative one. We do ask, why do you choose the games that you do for playing solo or solitaire? Artwork or graphics, the completeness in terms of like a series or a designer or publisher trying to complete a set there. Conflict, theater, or battle, the designer, educational utility, because some folks are interested in these for learning purposes, the game system, the publisher, whatever. So we do ask folks, what's the primary reason you do this? And we could certainly filter the responses by that as well and see. I'm a little leery of that and even with the games that are up there on the list for Comancheria and Navajo Wars, like they still are only in the teens for a total number of votes.
Yeah.
So it's tough to project too much, but it'd still be interesting to see what's there for those.
Yeah. Also, those of you who are watching this, if you didn't vote and you're curious, do it next year so we can get more delicious data.
End of the summer every year, right? Sometime in early to mid-July, we'll launch it. It'll run for a month. So we'll leave it up for 30 days and then we'll pull it down and start crunching numbers.
Yeah.
But this year we started a little later just because when we normally launched it overlapped with Gen Con.
Yeah. I actually think next year we should try for a QR code at Origins, since you've got that war game section.
The War Game HQ.
Yeah.
We can do that. Although, like, putting a solo war game survey at a convention where everybody's sitting down at tables with other people seems a little counterintuitive. But
I go to conventions, Brant. Why are you acting like I'm a troll who lives in a basement? They only put me in a tiny work closet at work.
Hey, they didn't put you under a bridge, at least.
There is a really creepy, like, electric room down in the basement. I guess they could put me there.
With your red stapler on the desk.
Yes. Exactly so. But maybe I could get paychecks for years and nobody would know. No kidding.
Yeah. No pop culture reference too obscure for this group.
So the other thing I thought was kind of interesting was that once again we have a couple of games that are, as far as I know, out of print in the top 25. So one of those is Ambush, a classic, a classic among classics, and then kind of right there at the tail end, we've got Raid on Saint Nazaire.
Yep.
And so I think it's cool, and also I worry about people trying to get copies of everything on the top when it comes to games that are out of print. So
By people, Liz means her.
oh no, I
worried
have
about
both of
her
those.
getting copies of everything.
I'm good. No, but but actually, one of my big purchases this year was a copy of Ranger that I'm looking forward to exploring once all the oath files are submitted. I'm gonna just do research. And research just means I play solo games, because how do you be a good solo game designer if you don't play solo games all the time? That's my justification.
Sure.
But I'm wondering if in future years we're actually going to see those drop off, or will they hang in there for a long time?
Well,
I'm curious about it.
It's interesting you mentioned Ranger, because I don't think it's been on the list at all any year.
I think somebody mentioned it.
Did somebody previous years? I don't think it's on this year's list.
Somebody, one person.
Yeah, 164.
There one. There's two people that voted, and it ended up getting a total of 5 points. So somebody, it was either a second and fifth place vote, or a third and fourth place vote split there.
Yeah.
But yeah, and Ranger ain't coming back because Bill Gibbs passed away. His wife doesn't want to run Omega Games, so it's what's there is there, and that's it.
Can I make one observation about a series that I only see represented twice in the top 20, if I'm right, and that's the Coin series. I think we have Fire in the Lake and Cuba Libre there at 20.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what it has been in previous years. I know Coin games have always lived somewhere on the list. It's a very popular series. I certainly love it. I think what'll be interesting to watch in the next couple of years is how much the turn GMT has made towards a card-based, easier to run solo mode for those games, which they're starting to retrofit to some of the older published titles.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that will help overall raise the rankings of some of the Coin games. The games that don't have those card-driven, easy-to-use systems, and I wouldn't say easy, is probably a stretch, but easier to use. They have the old flowchart bots that, frankly, aren't as inviting or easy to use. And I think the longer those stay as the defining solo mode for a Coin game, then the more those games might drop over time. But we'll see if there's a trend in the other direction. Gandhi, I think Fire in the Lake now. I know they're working on one for Cuba Libre. A lot of these now have bot decks. They're definitely easier than the old flowcharts.
Yeah.
The Coin games have always been on the list a bit. Fire in the Lake always seems to be the top one. So in 2023, Fire in the Lake was tied for 18th. And then in 2024, it was up at 9th. So Fire in the Lake is always the top of the Coin games in the list. And I don't know if that's a topic thing, if that is an availability piece. The designers may have something to do with it, because you've got two rock stars on that one. I know that there are the solo bots for those have always been talked about as being really good compared to some of the other Coin games. So that may have something to do with it. For some reason, I'm thinking one of the expansions actually changes the bots a little bit.
It does. There are actually two expansions, one prequel, one sequel. And I think part of the appeal, it's all of the above, I think.
Yeah.
Everything you just said. But the epic scale of the game, which I've done, I've soloed all three parts that you can play as an interconnected story of the entire lead up to and aftermath of the Vietnam War. That epic scale is definitely appealing to a solo gamer like me. And if I can run that with cards, and even if they change a bit between expansions and main game, I think that makes it just easier to get to the solo gamers table.
Yeah. I for folks watching the video, I have all of the spreadsheets on my side monitor. That's why I keep looking away. It's not there's a squirrel out the window or anything. In 2023, Cuba Libre was I'm sorry, I take that back. I thought it was Cuba Libre. Falling Sky was the next coin game on the list after Fire in the Lake. And Falling Sky was tied for 25th, and Cuba Libre was tied for 26th. Last year, Pendragon was the second one on the list after Fire in the Lake. And it was, where was it? It was tied for 18th or so. So again, Fire in the Lake is always the top of the coin games that appear, but it's far from the only one. That was something that Mike had also brought up on the podcast as well. Is it something it'd probably take a little bit of manual coding to go through some of the lists there, but to kind of categorize what's there of these are the coin games, right? These are the more narrative kind of choose your own adventure sorts of games. These are the tower defense games. These are the whatever. And to kind of go through and look for themes or patterns across the types of games that you have in there. The Dan Verson fill in the blank leader games, right? Whether it's Corsair leader or Thunderbolt Apache leader or whatever. And even the Sherman leader or the different, the ground combat ones, those all use a very similar system. And he's like the only person using that system. So that would be a series that you would see kind of in there as well. It's something that, unfortunately, that's not an easy thing to query against the BGG database. So that's something that you would have to go in and manually code.
Interesting.
Yeah. So, but yeah, I mean, there's coin games are a consistent presence on the list. They're not always that high. I do find it interesting that Fire in the Lake has been the top one all 3 years. But there's always at least 2 of them in the top 25, 26 or so.
Yeah.
Sometimes the break point ends up at 26 or 27 because of ties further up in the list. But that's, we break it in the mid-high 20s, and there's pretty much always at least 2 coin games on the list, among our respondents. In that top block. I mean, there's other coin games further down.
Oh, yeah. Well, one thing that's kind of fun, as I mentioned before about this list, is that if you go all the way down, there's so many like one-off things that get mentioned. Like there's so many games that are one of someone's favorites that I've just never even heard of, or I've only heard of because I've run this list a couple times. And I think that that's really cool. Like there's always like a hidden gem to be discovered if you dig down enough. That said, there's still some things maybe that wouldn't have gotten mentioned that should have. So, Paul, I know you have some ideas on this matter.
I do. Before jumping in the ones that I'm thinking of that aren't on the list at all for various reasons, I also was interested in the so-called non-traditional titles on there. And I made note of a few. I'm not pretending they're the only ones. It depends on what your definition of non-traditional is. As far as a war game, the oldest argument in the book. I will say I'm an old grognard. I've been playing forever. I'm in that upper age demographic, but I am not a traditionalist by any stretch. I'm very open to new approaches to war games. I think if we were not, we would never have gotten Mark Herman's innovation with card-driven games, right? If we weren't open-minded about that and just stuck to hex and counter, it would be a very different gaming world. So I'm always interested in these titles. The ones that stood out to me are This War of Mine, which of course captures the civilian experience of war, Legion of Honor, which is about the grognard experience on the ground, right, during the Napoleonic era. Really great role-playing type game with mechanics. It's not pure role-playing. Votes for Women, of course, has been on the list, I think more than once now. Molly House and John Company, both on there. Might not be everybody's traditional ideas of war games. Congrats to Cole on that.
And Ricky.
And Ricky. And I also notice Imperium, that series from Osprey Games, which I quite enjoy. And I think certainly qualify as conflict simulations, if you prefer that term.
Yeah.
Imperium's also been reskinned with a totally amazing reskin for Star Trek, if you're a Trek fan. Star Trek Captain's Chair is one of the best Star Trek games I've ever played, and it's built on that Imperium skeleton. So those stood out to me as the non-traditionals, and I think we'll probably see more of those over time, as people play more games, as demographics change.
As you were mentioning the Legion of Honor, I was curious. I just went and looked because I saw it on there, but I didn't remember where it landed. Purple Haze, which is a new
I need to
release,
play
so
that
it
so
wouldn't have
bad.
been on the previous 2 years. It didn't exist in 2020. I mean, it was in playtesting in 2023. But Purple Haze was released this past year. It got 2 5th-place votes. That's it. I don't know if that says more about just who the audience was responding to this or what. I know it sold a ton because I've talked to the publishers. It sold a ton. They shipped a whole lot of them around. There was a lot of online chatter about it. It showed up in a couple of best of lists here and there that I've seen online, and it had some crossover appeal to sites that don't typically cover war games popping up and saying, "Hey, this is a really cool game. You should check it out." It's undeniably a war game. It falls, Paul, into your box of this is not a traditional war game. Hex encounter, blowing stuff up kind of game. It didn't resonate with the people that responded to this survey.
Yeah, but
Could be
I know
people
that the
like
game's huge.
Liz and myself who haven't played it yet, but would probably rank it pretty highly.
It was for folks that are interested. It was tied for 369th on.
But see, what's funny is when you say the title of that game, I'm feeling an immediate sense of recognition of, oh shit, that's something I should play. I've been hearing so much good buzz about that, and I just haven't got around to it yet. So that one could be a sleeper. Or I think that we just need a different subset of people maybe to pop on, because I think it's a game that I think is going to be around a while based on what people say about it. It's got everything it needs except the actual votes.
That is
so
true.
The two I was thinking of that aren't on the list, and Brant, you may have yours, Liz, you may have yours, and maybe I just missed them on the list, but I did do the search. They're both, I think, clearly war games. They may not yet have the recognition yet to kind of make their way onto that list. But the recognition for one of them certainly is growing. It's a newer title / series. The other is an older game that's now back in print in a second edition. So there's a story there. The one that's older and now is back in a much better edition, frankly, that's lovely, great graphic design, and just a great game is Unhappy King Charles, about the English Civil War. A great card-driven game. I love the original version. I love the new one even more. And for a long time, you couldn't get your hands on it very easily. It was basically out of print and expensive to buy online. But now you can, I believe. I got the newest edition, and it has a solo mode, and I quite enjoyed it. I would definitely want to keep playing that one, solo and 2-player. And the other one you're probably all familiar with is Sebastian Bay's Littoral Commander. Not literal, but littoral as in shoreline, Marines, etc. An account of modern or near future warfare. There's an Indo-Pacific volume. There's a Baltic volume. More on their way. They all come out of the Dietz Foundation. A lot of people are playing these games at Army War College, gatherings and seminars. So it's not just at game stores. And that's a game that actually lends itself well to a kind of multi-handed solo approach. It doesn't have an official solo mode, but it's very soloable and very enjoyable.
So 2023 Littoral Commander got 1 second-place vote.
So it's been there once.
Nothing since. Unhappy King Charles got a 5th-place vote each of the last 2 years, but is not on there this year.
Okay.
Interesting.
Yeah.
For me, what I noticed was just
that's probably the same dude replied the first 2 years and just didn't.
He didn't do the survey
and didn't bother to fill out the survey because
it wasn't me.
Have gone down from the first year to the second year to the third year. We have dropped participants a little bit. I'm a little concerned with that. I'd hate to see that trend continue. I think part of it is the promotional side of things. I think part of it is, as Liz has said, there may just be a little bit of fatigue from the audience there. I would like to see people, even if your top 5 hasn't changed, I'd love to see people still put that same top 5 in there this year.
Yeah.
Just to continue to represent those games that are your favorites, and let's make sure that they are still heard from. So
Yeah. I will say one thing that made me a little sad was a big drop from 2023 for Europa Universalis: Price of Power. It's heavy. It's a big boy. But I think that it's a game that's really worth engaging with. And so seeing it go from having been in the list in 2023, because I can see the thumbnail on on our previous, like on my little geek list tab over here. I think it's a bummer that it's now like in the 300s or something like that. And there's also games that I think I'd like to see get a little bit more recognition. So Votes for Women is actually pretty high up. But other games I kind of think of as in that kind of new wave of trying to, I guess, make war or historical games that are about non-kinetic topics. So Stonewall Uprising appears in the list very low, but I actually think that's a game that's really worth the time. I think it's good. I'm not saying it has to, there's only 25 of the top 25, but I'd like to see more attention and kind of groundswell under some of those games that are maybe not super traditional war games. And I know that Europa Universalis: Price of Power is not either. But games that are worth your time sitting there and thinking about and playing.
So
For you, go ahead, Brent.
Well, just a quick question, Liz, on Europa Universalis specifically. So it was in the top 26, 27, whatever it was that first year.
Yeah.
Last year it dropped down to 51st.
Yeah.
And then this year it's way down on the list.
Yeah.
Do you think that one became what we thought Mr. President might become, which was the new hotness that kind of fell off?
I think that's possible, but Paul, you've played a lot of POP. Like, I think it's a little bit of a shame.
I have a theory on that. It could be totally wrong. First, I love the implementation of EU that is in that new board game. It is a great multiplayer experience. My group has adored it. We want to get back to it. In fact, after World in Flames is done, whenever that is. And
2029.
It has a great solo mode, a pretty easy to use set of decks. Of course, it requires you understanding the game itself first. So I'm not saying it's an easy climb, but I will admit I have run a game with 6 bots fighting each other of Europa Universalis. So I put that system through its paces, and it's really excellent given the complexity of the base game. I think the theory is that it's such an investment of time to play the base game with people or to play it even solo. It's not so much a mechanical challenge as a time challenge and a table space challenge. That's probably why it's seeing less play now than it did when it first came out. Now there's an expansion coming that may resuscitate, the attention to the game on the solo front a bit.
Yeah, but if that's the case, why a drop for Europa Universalis but not for Mr. President?
Yeah, that's what I was about to say too. Because table space, Mr. President, you need an aircraft carrier to set it up.
Well, Mr. President is designed for solo game.
Yeah.
So I think there's a kind of readiness to the solo player there that doesn't require the same lift. I mean, it's a huge lift, but it's not the same as EU.
Can I make my mandatory Mr. President joke?
Yes.
That small self-published indie game of Mr. President.
Yeah.
Yes. It's in my Steam wish list though. I think my own plays of Mr. President are going to go up once it's available as a computer game.
It was very smart of them to get it implemented online. I think it will see more play that way.
Yeah. The whole self-published thing, it takes people a second to sort of realize what I'm saying there, but it's I do find it interesting that a purpose designed solo game has the AI built into it and should be among the easiest possible things in the world to adapt for digital play. And yet, how many of these actually have digital modes?
I like playing it on the table, though.
I'm not saying I don't enjoy the table piece of it all. Like I am very much a tactile gamer. The things that I play digitally are things I'm not playing on a tabletop. right? I have a long, 30 plus year civilization addiction at this point that I continue to feed. So, and I'm not playing that on the tabletop. But the solo game with the AI built in is the easiest thing in the world to, I'm not saying the actual writing of the code is easy, but there's no design work underneath it. Like you're literally just transposing stuff into the digital realm.
Yeah.
And those don't make their way into the digital world nearly as often.
I think you're onto something, Brant. I think it would be easier than a lot of other things to implement online. And certainly, while I prefer the tactile experience 100%, when I'm on an airplane, I can't lay out my game,
Yes.
in the middle of the aisle, without being escorted off the plane by the police later. So I think, we crave these kinds of games, and maybe the tariff situation with all the downsides to that, and the overall cost of making games will lead more of these titles to have an online implementation, perhaps even an exclusively online implementation, which would make me sad. I mean, I want them to be board games. But I think there are a lot of titles, Brant's right, that already, and they could be older titles, that have the AI going for them already and would not be too hard to transition.
Yeah, makes sense. So something I want to talk about in this kind of last stretch of this video is something that's not in the podcast because Brant hadn't crunched the data yet, which is we've now got our lovely list of what publishers are involved in our list. So we've got like a publisher column and a designer column. So I'm just kind of looking through, and GMT published 10 of the top 26 games on my quick count. That is a very nice representation.
So just to be clear, the publisher and designer, as they are returned in our list, are not necessarily 100% accurate, because the query of the BGG database, and this is a programmatic query that we had somebody run for us, because Min is a lot smarter about the code piece than I am. It returns the first person associated with the game as the designer, or the first publisher if there were multiple publishers. So if it was originally published in Europe and somebody brought it to the States and did a localization for the US, or vice versa, it's going to show up with first publisher. First designer is a little bit more of a headache because you do have co-designs out there. And so like Fire in the Lake was a co-design, but I think Volko is the only one credited for it. I have to go double check, but it's not always the right answer. It's often an incomplete answer, I think is the way to say that. So I just want to caution folks with that when they see the data there.
Sure. All the same, we're going to ruin all of your scruples and have fun, Brant. Okay.
Go for it.
But no, seriously. So GMT definitely has the lion's share among publishers in that top stretch of the list. And I just think that's cool. I'm looking through here. I see Decision Games only appears twice in its top stretch, but it's games 2 and 3. So D-Day and RAF. Let's see.
Compass second, I thought it was, but
I think so. Yeah. And then there's 3 DVG titles in here.
Yeah. For the actual counts across the entire list, GMT led the way. The list credits with 98 total titles. Compass with 25, Decision with 20, DVG at 19, White Dog at 17, and the bulk of those are probably Ben Madison games with Dave Kershaw right behind. Multi-Man, Revolution, Lock and Load, Avalon Hill, and then self-published with double-digit number of games. And then it goes on down from there. So self-published and web-published are both on there, and those are essentially the same thing, but BGG credits them differently. SPI is only on there with 4, but I think there's probably a bunch that were originally done by SPI that have been re-implemented by Decision, and so it's a bit of a duality there. Some of them, I think, are probably SPI games that Decision hadn't got to yet.
So, Brant, would you say GMT's representation there. I'm sure part of it is just market share.
Yeah.
It would be true of a lot of lists, not just a solo list. But would you say that they might have been early adopters as far as leaning into games that have good solo modes or are solo only? There was a time when I think game makers avoided solo modes. They didn't see the point. And maybe GMT was wise to that a little earlier than most.
Maybe. I think the other piece of it is that the bulk of the Mark Herman card-driven game universe, that pantheon, are they're almost all GMT published. And I think Stuka Joe's CDG solo system probably helps push those up a bit, where having a purpose-built tool to do that solo adaptation for those styles of games probably draws more eyeballs to them. But I think also, GMT does have some purpose-built solo things like I, Napoleon and Fields of Fire, and so that probably helps as well. So I think GMT is just so big that they cover a lot of space.
Yeah.
And so, like you said, market share is for GMT, even if it's not pure market share, mind share is certainly very high for them.
Well, thanks for noting Stuka Joe, because that's an example of, the end user community, the fan community stepping in and sort of showing the way on solo mode approaches.
Yeah.
Which maybe companies need to see, before they start realizing we can do this ourselves.
Yeah. Well, and something else that came up the other day that I thought was a little interesting. So there's Compass Games, as we are recording this, Compass Games has now started shipping their holiday catalogs, right? The giant fold out holiday catalog that is always a blast to receive every year. And look, we're all weird in our own ways. One of the weirdo things that I've got, I have a giant stack of game company catalogs in a box here that I hang on to over the years. Like going all the way back to mid-70s Avalon Hill catalogs. Like if I get a used game and it's still got the catalog in there, I pull those things out and I throw them in a stack, to the point where a bunch of the local gamers here know that I keep these things. And so they've started bringing me their older catalogs from older games. And going back, the Compass one in particular, I've got them back to 2019. And somebody had asked about, hey, how long has this particular game been in the Compass Games catalog? They asked in our Discord server the other day. And so I was like, I got them back to 2019. Let me go look. It's in there in 2019, coming soon. And like all the way up to this year, it's still coming soon. They just keep changing the date. But I noticed, just kind of eyeballing these things the other day when I was flipping through looking for that answer for Bill, that more and more of the things in the Compass catalog from 2019 to 21 to 22 to 23, I don't know if they published one in 2020, but I don't have it if they did, that you start to see more games either designated as designed for solo play or, solo compatible. Both of those designations go up. So they were taking in more designs for solo designers, as well as highlighting in more places that they had solo adaptations available to them. So, and that's one company, just because I happen to have the catalogs over several years, I can go and compare between them.
Yeah.
But I do think it's something that you've seen more of, and probably became more, as Liz has noted, probably became more popular during the pandemic, and then people
they're not coming out any faster though.
Yeah, no.
I will say, I mean, talking about kind of hobbyists stepping in, I don't think that I would have my job if it weren't a clear community message that people want solo modes, and they want good, thoughtful solo modes that actually show care for the solo community. So I have a mandate at work to try to meet those expectations, which I wake up in a cold sweat occasionally. But I think that any Kickstarter you look at, any crowdfund, does it solo? Is there going to be a solo mode? People want it, and I think that we also owe a lot to Wargames, from their inception, from early. I think, for those attitudes. And one thing I really enjoy about doing this list every year is, even if you're a hobby gamer who does not consider themselves a wargamer, I think that the entire solo gaming hobby owes a lot to, especially some of these earlier wargame titles, because people playing against themselves, people coming up with kind of rudimentary early bots, the rise of like narrative gaming, all those things, as far as I know, emerge from the wargame community. And so, even if you don't consider yourself a wargamer, something that you're playing has wargame DNA.
Liz, to your point there, first, amen to everything you said. And obviously, one of the reasons we became friends is our similar perspective on solo wargaming. The sea change in the whole community may be reflected in the fact that there's now inherent pressure, I think, to create solo modes, even when the game might not be appropriate to it.
Yeah.
And I think designers now have to know when to say, look, this just can't be soloed, or at least not in the published version. I mean, some person out there will always find a way, and that's fine by me.
Yes.
But as far as forcing that onto a game production circle or cycle, that's not something you want to do in every last case. And the pressure may be there to do it because companies see the advantage of having a mode.
Yeah.
The other thing we haven't talked about, the elephant in the room as always, is AI. And how will AI over time be used ad hoc by players of these various games? And if that's happening, will that affect our rankings?
We've got a local guy here that's already experimenting with that some, and then sharing. He's in our Discord also, and talks about it some in the Discord of, hey, I plugged in this information into one of the LLMs and said, give me this plan. And so he kind of used that as the broad strokes opponent of these are the kinds of things we're going to have this thing do. And then he executes from there. Going back to the idea of looking back over time as to where or how some of these things developed. I remember when the solo game universe was Ambush and Patton's Best. And like that was it. Like that, Ambush and its expansions, and then Patton's Best. And that was it. But the other thing was, at the time, if you go back to up through the early and mid 80s, basically up until TSR buys SPI, the war game universe up to that point, because that's kind of a fairly clear break point in the history of tabletop wargaming, at least. There weren't a lot of particularly weird cases out there for the games. The block games, what's now the Columbia block games, are the clear exception, where there was an unambiguous fog of war, hidden information that clearly could not be penetrated without fundamentally changing the game. There was some fog of war that was sort of two-sided fog of war in the case of the late 70s, mid-late 70s. SPI had a series of games that I want to say Panzer Group of Guderian was the first of the ones to use the untried units. So they're face down units. You don't know what the combat values are. You only know what the movement values are until they're in contact. You can solo that. I mean, it's hidden information, but it's hidden from both players. So it's not like you get an inherent advantage or you have to switch off your brain one way or the other. The Mod Quad 2, Invasion America, there were a couple of those games that had that untried unit mechanic. Gives you some fog of war that is soloable with no real change in how you play the game. The block games, obviously, you can't because the information is only facing one player. But up until you put cards in people's hands, there's not really a whole lot of information that only one player is privy to. And so while something like Patton's Best or Ambush gave you a surprise factor as the player, you could play Africa Corps two-handed. You could play, Mech War 2. You could play Napoleon's Last Battles. You could play any of those two-handed because there's nothing hidden. So it's not like you have an inherent advantage one way or the other up to that point. I think once you start seeing the Mark Herman CDGs, once you start seeing more block games, once you start seeing information that is only held by one player. The TCS games with the ops sheets from MMP, or the ASL games with the hidden setup where you can cover your stacks of counters with question marks. Mm-hmm. Once you get to information that is only available to one player, now suddenly the bots become a little more necessary. So,
yeah, I think there's a lot of truth in that.
Yeah.
I also want to talk really quick just about the designers who are appearing a lot at the top.
Yeah.
Because John Butterfield is clearly still the man. There's a good variety in this top 25, but
I did go look. Fire in the Lake is credited only to Mark Herman, not to Volko. In the way, so BGG lists both Mark Herman, Volko Runke, but the way the query returned to us, it only credits Mark Herman, not both. Which is cumbersome, right? A bunch of Ben Madison designs are co-designs with Wes Ernie. A bunch of David Thompson designs are co-designs with, other than the Valiant
Pavlos House is just David.
Yeah. The Valiant Defense ones, I think, are all just David. But other than that, I think literally everything else David's done has been with somebody else.
Yes. He's got just a whole crew of us that just...
It's the Cambridge Six, right? Somebody posted the graphic on social media not long ago of, David and Trevor Benjamin and those couple of other folks and the connections between all of them of who's worked with who. So,
although David will tell you that co-design is just more fun. So solo gaming, but make it together is, I think, the advice.
I think at the top of the list, it's the usual suspects, right? Butterfield, Herman, Dan Verson, Ben Madison, Richard Berg, Gregory M. Smith, who's probably designed 7 more games in the time it's taken us to record this.
Yeah.
Richard Clark, Dave Kershaw, Herman Lutman, Volko, Jim Dunnigan, Mike Lambo, Mike Ranella. Like that's if you give me your
the rogues gallery
of top 10
designers.
solo game designers, like that's there they are. It is exactly who you would expect them to be, which I don't find weird. That's
no, not at all. All right, so as we kind of reach the close of the hour, I guess do y'all have some final thoughts and maybe some hopes for the future of this list?
Paul, what do you got?
I'm just always intrigued by the list each year now that I've gotten involved with all of you talking about it. I am interested in some of the things Brant was mentioning earlier about changing demographics among wargamers. And that's not, I'm so glad Brant said, it's not just an age thing. It's in fact maybe more so about who's a veteran of these games and who's a rookie to these games, regardless of when they're getting started. You are seeing, just as we found a lot of wargamers migrating to try other types of games, be it Euro games or whatever it might be, card deck builders, etc. It goes the other direction too, right? People who would never have imagined themselves trying a war game per se are now experimenting with them or even designing them. And they're realizing that it's not just Hex and Counter anymore. And even Hex and Counter is being appreciated by those new gamers who might have been gaming for decades, right? But they are new to that sort of war game sphere. So the data will just get more interesting as we get more people involved in this community. And I agree, we need to get more people doing the survey. I think we will have some interesting revelations, the larger our set gets of respondents.
I will say that one fear I have about our list marketing, and maybe this ties into my own hopes for the future of the list, is that, I think that people, when they see, oh, what are your top war games? I think a lot of people still tell themselves they're not war gamers, even if actually they are, even if it's the non-traditional style. And I want people to feel comfortable. This is only asked for your top 5. And I want to get to a place where enough people have played 5 historical games, 5 war games on their own, so they feel like they are contributors to the list. And that is my goal. I would like to see more people either new to this or doing it, but like embracing the fact that they're one of us.
And to clarify, Liz, and Brant, the list does not, it seems to me at all, exclude non-historical war games and conflict simulations. So
This was
Root is
explicitly
on there.
historical.
I think
Yeah.
Root's on the list, though.
We can't control what people put in the list.
Right.
So
right.
in years
Board Game
past,
Geek.
yeah. So in years past, we had things like Space Empires 4X showed up on the list. And I think Burning Banners was on there last year. I'd have to go back and look, but we had non-realistic games, let's say it that way, because we still have, you'll still find some Cold War Goes Hot games on there, even though those aren't strictly historic. Littoral Commander is not a historic game, like
Right.
it's near future,
Yeah.
but it's still
Right.
realistic, if you will. One of the things that we did specifically put in the information in the invite this year, the initial post that said, hey, come do this survey, was we were looking for war and historical games, not the fantasy sci-fi stuff. So please don't put the fantasy and sci-fi things on here.
I see.
So we don't get Space Infantry or Freedom in the Galaxy or Space Empires 4X or whatever.
Yeah.
So this year we did put that specific caveat in the intro to everything that we didn't do in 2023 and 24. I think we'll probably leave it in place going forward.
Yeah.
But that doesn't rule out something like Molly House, which is
Right.
not a war game, but it is a deeply themed historical game.
Right.
And
Yeah.
I think for you know, when Liz and I first talked about this, her vision of kind of that deep historical theme, we were okay going a little further afield. And yeah, we'd end up roping in Molly House as a part of that. But we also put in there, we're not defining wargaming for you. Because for some people, Twilight Struggle's a war game. For other folks, it's not. For some folks, you know, John Company is a war game. For others, it is not. We're not going to try and draw that line for you.
So I would say I appreciate the caveat. And personally, I gravitate to historical games myself.
Yeah.
But as Liz said, people are going to put what they're going to put down on the list. So I wouldn't get rid of the caveat. I would just say we live in interesting times, right?
Yeah.
Where the number one war game on Board Game Geek is War of the Ring, which is a great game. And I do think it is a war game. It doesn't have a solo mode, nor do I really think it ought to have one. People have tried. I've tried them, and some of them are great efforts, but it's just not really designed as that. But in an environment where that is viewed as a war game, it should inform our conversation. Let's say that. But I agree with the caveat in principle.
Yeah, that's something that in order to better hone our focus, we put that in there. Not that I was afraid of War of the Ring and Burning Banners sort of running away with the list or anything. But I think it helps us focus the audience a little bit on the kinds of things we're looking for.
Agreed.
You know, and people, to use Liz's vocabulary, people have understood the assignment. Nobody's putting Ticket to Ride on the list. You know, we're not
anything's a war
those.
game if you try hard enough. Okay.
Yes. We're not so much worried about those. You know, I definitely want to see participation go up.
Yeah.
And I think there are some ways that we can approach encouraging that participation. One of them is simply, hey, if you've done this survey, please go recruit a friend to do it also.
Yeah.
You know, there's the Ozarski joke of, well, if you're playing solo games because you don't have any friends. Yeah, fine. Go find a friend. Part of it is some of the best places to market this are ones that have some inherent restrictions on how much you market to their audiences, like some of the Facebook groups. I mean, there's 15,000 people in the main Wargamers group on Facebook, but they are fairly restrictive about how often you promote things like this, that if you don't hit them multiple times, of those 15,000, 14,000 of them never see it because of how often they log in and how many other things show up and push you down the list there. So there are some challenges trying to get the word out. I don't live on Reddit, but even the friends that I have that hang out on Reddit have tried to post, hey, you should go check this thing out. And it gets flagged as spam on Reddit. It'd be nice to have some way to get it into the appropriate groups there.
But Reddit's scary though.
It can be, but there are some very active wargaming groups on Reddit, and it would be nice to be able to promote this through some of those. I don't have a Reddit account. There's a place or two here and there where I go read some stuff like my local community just to see, hey, new restaurants opening up. But I don't hang out on Reddit, so I don't have an account to try and do that stuff. But folks who do tried to help and got flagged as spam, and that was kind of annoying. So it would be nice to be able to more organically grow the marketing. And Liz, the QR code at Origins would probably help that. You guys could probably do it at Gen Con too, here or there or somewhere.
Yeah.
Whatever other summer conventions we might be able to hit. It's tough. It's tough. You're asking for people to voluntarily help you out somehow and not get a whole lot out of it. But it would be nice to have
get a sick list of the top war games.
It would be nice to have a bigger data set. And ultimately, I think it comes back to, hey, participants, please share this and go get a friend to come do it also.
Yeah. Yeah. So here's hoping for bigger years. But honestly, I just love doing this list every year because I like to see what people like. I think it's really cool. And it makes me, I guess, feel like reconnected to everybody to see that, what everybody else is playing. It's like, I don't know. It's like a touch base with a bigger conversation that I like being a part of.
Yeah. And one thing just real quick that I will throw out. So we've got the master list that's already been published. We've got it excerpted down to just the top 26, 27 or so. Again, it expands a little bit because of some ties that Liz has posted as a geek list over at Board Game Geek. But we also do some additional data crunching with some of those other data, some other parts of the data that we have. So for instance, we separated out the top 25 for the rookies versus the veterans, the top 25 for the folks that are 75% or more of their board gaming is wargaming versus the 0 to 25%. So the high wargamer versus low wargamer count in your board gaming diet. We've got some crosstabs of how much you are, or why do you play versus what percentage of your game is your gaming is wargaming. Where do you get your info by what percentage of your gaming is wargaming? So we've got some additional data diving that we've done that's going to get published over the next few weeks after this video goes out there. Like if you're listening to this 2 years later, like it's already published, go look for it. I am happy to let other people crunch numbers also. I don't mind providing a set of de-identified data to folks to say, hey, go take a look at this, see what you get. If you find something interesting, crunch away. I am happy to let other folks play with the data also. I've made that offer every year. Nobody's taken me up on it yet.
Well,
maybe this is the year.
Maybe right. Rookies versus vets is very interesting. I was just looking at it. That alone. Yeah.
Yeah. And for those, once we start slicing the data set thinner, you really can't draw a whole lot of conclusions outside of about the top 10 to 15 or so, simply because you don't have enough votes to really aggregate up. At that point, one favorite game is going to skew what's left of the voting down below. But that top 10 to 15 or so, you've got enough votes that you can really see some distinctions. The other thing I haven't pulled yet that I need to is I want to go back and take a look at the games that showed up on all three lists. Not necessarily in the top 10 to 15 or so, because it's a lot of the usual suspects. But I'm also curious, what's the population of games that only ever showed up on one list? Right? What are the ones that showed up on 2023 and never again, or 2024 and never again? So,
yeah. Or do we just have one person who will never give up on their favorite? And I respect that.
Yes. What's the one game that got one first place vote in all three surveys? Happy to see that guy, right? He's voting for the one he designed. I say he, it could be she. I'm happy either way.
So on this note, since we've been going about an hour, we will conclude. But gentlemen, thank you so much for coming on. This has been such a fun chat. I enjoy doing this every year, and I'm looking forward to next year.
Same here.
Absolutely.
All right, everybody out there, please like, subscribe, ask questions, and most of all, happy gaming. Go play a war game.